get started here in a couple minutes, but in the meantime, just know how grateful we are that you've taken the time tonight to be with us and with one another.
Ooh, your squares are getting smaller. Welcome, everybody.
Oh.
Who is on the telephone? Hello?
Hello?
Who is on the telephone?
This is Clark.
Oh, hi, Clark. How you doing?
Clark Downs from Redeemer.
Oh, Clark.
Hello.
Hey, Joan. Okay. I'll give everybody one more minute and then we'll get started. Hi, Jane.
Hi, how are you, Cricket?
I'm good.
Good. Andrew.
Hi, Mary.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Bye.
Okay.
Adrian.
Shall we get started?
Great.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Cricket Park, and I serve as the Dean for the South Montgomery County region. Welcome to our 2021 regional gathering. Just need to walk through some guidelines for our time together. Please keep yourself muted at all times unless you're recognized to speak, and that'll make it easier for all of us to hear. There'll be time for questions and answers throughout the gathering, and if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, just use the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat as well as probably several other people, and we'll call on you in turn. If we have anyone participating by phone, you may dial star 9, that's star key and the 9 key, to indicate you have a question. So for our agenda, we'll begin in a moment with an opening prayer and then hear a few words from Bishop Mary Ann. And there'll be an update on this diocesan strategic plan, an overview of the draft budget for 2022. And then we will take a short break, 10 minutes, and reconvene to talk about Afghan Refugee Ministries. And then we'll close the meeting with prayer. Are there any questions? And the Lord be with you. And also with you. Let us pray. O God of peace, who has taught that in returning and rest we shall be saved, in quietness and in confidence shall be our strength. By the might of your Spirit, lift us, we pray, to your presence, where we may be still and know that you are God. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Bishop Mary Ann.
Hi, everyone. I add my welcome to that of Cricket. And of course, thank you, Cricket, for your leadership as the Dean of this region. I will have a few remarks as part of the strategic plan piece later on, but I didn't want the night to begin without thanking you for your presence and leadership in the congregations you serve, as well as being with us tonight. There's not a day that goes by when I don't give thanks to God for the people of this diocese, and I'm really excited about what God seems to be stirring among us, even as we face into some of the most significant challenges that have confronted our churches in a long time. So it's that combination of great challenge and great opportunity, and daily reminders of how our reliance on the grace of God, the power of Christ working in and among us, and the gift of Christian community. So in that spirit, I'll stop here and talk to you a bit later, but I pass the floor on now to my colleague, Anne-Marie Jeffrey, who will start us off with the strategic plan update.
We're moving right along. As Bishop Mary Ann said, I'm Anne-Marie Jeffrey. I am your canon for Congregational Vitality, and I am delighted to be here with you. I'm in my 6th month, and I'm here to update you on the first part, one of 3 parts of the strategic plan, and that is revitalization. Now, last year for revitalization, we as a diocese created the 7 vital signs of parish health. And they were presented at the regional meetings, and you were given discussion guides, encouraged to engage in them. And the work this year has been on the revitalization, has been on the vital signs, again, some more. And I want to talk about why that is so important. Alan, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Vital signs of parish health are fundamental to revitalization. And often I hear stories saying, oh, well, if we just did the program that diocese did, and oh, if we have this kind of event, people are going to come. There's no magic wand for revitalization to happen. We know that it takes consistent work in areas that we know will bring health. And those are our vital signs: compelling mission and vision, a clear discipleship path, faithful financial practices, inspiring and capable leadership, welcoming and connecting ministries, uplifting and inviting worship, and blessing our community. That is what work on those signs, consistent work over time, is what will make us grow and thrive. And so in that vein, the work this year has been to bring those vital signs more deeply into our life as a diocese, as congregations, and make it a part of our language and just who we are, because they really do undergird our work of revitalization. Earlier this year, we had Teaching Tuesdays. Our missioner for revitalization, who is now director of St. Timothy's, he did Teaching Tuesdays. And so every Tuesday was focused on the vital sign. It was a great opportunity to connect, discuss, learn about the vital signs, but also ask questions and engage. Later on in the year, when I came aboard, the Parish Vitality Working Group gathered. And a version of that group was where the vital signs began. The whole diocese worked on it. But we regathered and we talked about how could we bring this more to the forefront of congregations' minds, how we can have it sink in. And we tried a few things, but one of the things we did was we had a session where we told stories related to vital signs, and specifically stories of during the pandemic. And it was a powerful session. because we were hearing of sources of vitality in the parish that rose up during the pandemic. And I just left that session lifted up and realized this is a good way to ground ourselves in the vital signs in yet another way. And so we're going to be inviting the whole diocese into that conversation on November 18th on Zoom. And I will be putting that link in the chat at the end. I hope you'll join us. It's a way for us to record the signs of vitality that happened during COVID, and just to be aware of how these vital signs can work so powerfully in our congregations. Just some other ways the vital signs have been happening this year. Tending our soil. Vital signs are an integral part of that. Well, naturally, it's a revitalization program. And so the vital signs are woven into the work of that program. And you'll hear more about that program later from my colleague, Jennifer Gamber. The clergy transition process also uses the vital signs, and what's called a parish vitality assessment helps the parish take a look at where they are and prepare themselves to think about next steps as a clergy person leaves and as they think about what's next for their parish. And I want to give you some, let's go next slide. I forgot to say this. So at the end of last year, there was a discussion guide on the vital signs, and people used it. And from the parish check-ins that we did earlier this year, we have found that 31 of 58 parishes responding have engaged with the vital signs. So that's over half of the parishes that responded. Would we like it to be more? Yes, but that's pretty good. So they're starting to sink in. They're starting to happen. And I wanted to end with some examples in your region of the vital signs. And these are just examples. If I only could give 3, because I only have 5 minutes. One is blessing our community from St. John's Norwood. 3 things that they're doing: weekly distribution of food for over 300 families, sponsoring refugee families, which now includes African families. They've been doing that before and continued. And then advocacy work around COVID vaccinations, affordable housing, and prison reform. That sign is a source of vitality in their congregation. And if you talk to them, you will hear it. Another one, uplifting and inviting worship, Church of Ascension, Silver Spring. Like many like everybody almost during the pandemic, they took to live stream worship when we couldn't go into the buildings. But they watched how invigorating it was to be attentive to that worship, as they didn't just live stream, but they added the choir, virtual choir, they added the children singing, they added their healing rite, and it began to bear fruit. People across the country, former parishioners, people in other countries, were now connecting and responding to this worship. Worship was changing them. And some of those people are pledging. So that's an example of how worship can just lift you up. And finally, All Saints Chevy Chase with compelling mission and vision. Yes, I've been on your website, BJ, and they have a strategic plan started in 2019, and they identified mission and vision. And out of that mission and vision came 3 core priorities, which are to strengthen our spiritual and biblical foundation, expand mission and outreach, create a robust student ministry. And if you look on their website, you will see how those core priorities are playing out. And that shows the power of having compelling mission and vision, how that can lift up your ministry and direct you. So that's all about all the time I have. And I hope those examples help you think about the ways you are being vital in your church around those signs, and also the places where you might like to do some more work. I'm always happy to come out and talk to you about the vital signs, whether it be all of them or to focus on one. And I really do hope you'll join us on November 18th to share some stories around the vital signs, particularly during COVID time. Thank you. And I turn it over to Jennifer Gamber, my colleague.
Thank you very much, Anne Marie. I'm the Reverend Jennifer Gamber, and I'm the director of the School for Christian Faith and Leadership and the Tending Our Soil Thriving Congregations Initiative. So let's begin with the first slide, please. Thank you. So the big news is it's a launch. At this time last year, the school had just begun, and the Tending Our Soil was just a proposal. And in the intervening times, the school has grown, and we received the grant from the Lilly Foundation and have added to that and grown both programs. We'll start with the school. As you call, the mission of the school is to inspire, equip, connect, and empower the people of God for faithful life and leadership. So this is both for clergy and laity. We do this by offering online courses with a new learning hub that was premiered in September, by developing curriculum for congregations, toolkits, and other assets for leadership, parish consultations for conversation about formation, leadership, and parish vitality. We have an advisory board that guides our future decisions, as well as a foundational document that establishes our core beliefs, as well as our metrics for success. The image you see here actually is a snapshot of the Learning Hub and the first set of courses there. This fall, we have 12 live courses, 19 on-demand courses, and since September, nearly 300 people have been taking courses, and 450 course registrations. I'm going to put the link if you want to learn more about the school. There's a link to learn more about the school. The areas that we offer courses, the vast majority, which are led by people from within the Diocese of Washington. When I talk about the school, I say that when you look at the offerings, they should reflect the strategic initiatives of the diocese. When you look at the school offerings, you should say, this sounds like the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. And we're lifting up the gifts and wisdom of the people of the Diocese of Washington. They're meant for our congregations, but they're open to anyone. And we've become known as a source of trusted courses and content across the country. And I just heard today someone who Googled vestry training, and the first Google back was the school and our vestry offering. Surprise, surprise. We have offerings in the areas of justice, finance and administration, formation, evangelism, pastoral care, biblical studies, and parish vitality. Our most popular on-demand courses have been a course called Explore, which is a series of 6 videos, starting with Marianne Buddy, but continuing with the faith stories of many of our congregational leaders. That is also available as a congregational course. The congregational course is called Discover. I'll say a little bit more in a minute about that. The other popular course has been Pastoral Care. That was a course that had 75 people last spring and a number of people this fall from across the country wanting to learn more. So what we often do, or for the premier courses that we've offered in the fall through the year, we take those videos, chunk them out into shorter bits, and then offer them as an on-demand course. We've been, other dioceses have reached out to us saying, can we take one of your on-demand courses, create a cohort, and move a group of our people through that course? And of course, we're glad to say yes to them. The popular live courses is one that just finished called Vision and Mission Alignment by the Unstuck group. That is one of 4 courses this year that will be launched as part of the Tending Our Soil. The school and the Tending Our Soil are integrally related to one another. The other is an at-home formation series. We're taking each of the liturgical seasons and creating an at-home course. So this is formation at home in Advent, Epiphany, Easter, Lent, all the seasons of the year. An upcoming course that you might want to take is Ministry with Young Adults. There's the link to register. If you need EDAW 100 Fall 21, That's the code you would use as a member of an EDOW congregation to take that course for free. We also have curriculum for congregations. There's 7 of them. One called Discover, Embrace, Become, which is in its entirety an 18-week course, but you can take it as a 6-week, 3 6-week segments. That is a modern day catechumenal process to grow in faith and learn more about the Episcopal Church. There's also one called Create, which is an online confirmation program. One of our congregations was so thrilled to share that they have the largest number of confirmands going through that course right now. The toolkits that we offer, one that's coming down the pike is a Path of Discipleship toolkit, which is going to include 3 card decks, a phone app, and a poster that highlights a path of discipleship with 5 key practices: pray, learn, serve, give, and share. This phone app is going to be out by the end of this month. It'll be free for everyone. It's a way to grow in faith just using your phone. And it will, if you say, turn on location, and I've done this, it will show me my nearby Episcopal churches. So it will show me how close I am to all of them. If you go on to so the school has been launched. If you can go to the next slide, please. The mission of the Tending Our Soil Thriving Congregations is to cultivate the changed soil of our diocese so that God's love might grow in our time and place. 12 congregations have begun peer learning cohorts for a 3-year journey of learning and reimagining Christian practices to meet a changing culture. And this first year includes 2 congregations from Southern Montgomery, Ascension Sligo Parish, and St. Dunstan's Bethesda. We have congregations from 7 of our 8 regions. So thank you to those 2 congregations who have been taking the courageous and bold step toward greater vitality in a program that includes coaches all around, looking at vital signs and meeting with one another to learn from each other. The first year is about mission and vision. The year of listening to what God is up to in your congregation, in your neighborhood, and in the Episcopal tradition, so that you can reimagine and refresh your vision, mission and vision for your congregation. And that is to get ready for year 2, in which you plan and equip to fulfill that mission, to reach toward that mission. We finished the first learning lab at San Mateo with a follow-up course in mission and strategy, and where we learned about church life cycle and the strategic alignment pyramid, which is really the map forward. Learning Lab 2 in November will focus on reaching our neighbors with a follow-up with a mission insight course, which is available to every congregation. I want to really emphasize that as much as we are able to make possible, all of the things that Attending Our Soil does is available to all of our congregations. We have access to the Unstuck Learning Hub, not just for those 12 congregations, but for every congregation. So if you want access to all of the Unstuck masterclasses, email me. I will send you a link to join that Learning Hub. You can move along with us, and then hope. My prayer would be those who feel that they are ready would then want to join again next year. We will welcome another 12 congregations. If you would like me or Anne Marie or Emily Snowden to come and make a presentation about the Tending Our Soil Thriving Congregations initiative to your vestry, please don't hesitate to ask. We're eager to share the road ahead. They're currently listening to their congregations with assessments and currently doing a Readiness 360, which is a congregation-wide survey to identify areas of celebration and those that need attention as they prepare to grow. And they will then turn to discovering their neighborhood with mission insight and micro practices, little expeditions to get to know your neighbors better. And in the spring, they will reconnect with their Episcopal tradition with a new curriculum that will be offered by the Episcopal Church. And I can share that the Diocese of Washington will be a pilot diocese for a new curriculum being developed by the Episcopal Church. So I think that is all for this faith and leadership area. Thank you for listening. And now we will hear an update about equity and justice from Hazel Monet. She has prepared a video in advance.
Alan, we can't hear the video. So it seems like we're having a bit of a technical glitch, everyone. If you just give us a second. Alan,
I'm guessing if you unshare and then reshare and click the button that says share audio.
Thank you, BJ.
Hello, everyone in South Montgomery region. I'm Hazel Monet, and I'm the Missioner for Equity and Justice. And I'm really sad that I can't be there with you all in person virtually. And so I'm here virtually. But I just want to say a word about our updates around the strategic plan as it pertains to our equity and justice work. Some of you may remember our mission is to bravely uncover, understand, reckon with, and act to dismantle racism within ourselves, our faith communities, the diocese, and our localities. And what that looks like in this year as our priority has been really following the lead of our presiding bishop and of our diocesan bishop as we prioritize racial equity and racial justice initiatives, programs, and practices. Well, lucky for us, even though racial equity might make folks feel like, well, what about all the other things? Let me let you know. Racial equity is inherently intersectional. It means that we must be talking about all the other issues that many of you are working on, whether that be food justice, creation care, homeless ministries, and everything beyond and in between. And so part of our work this year together, because though this is my position as missioner, I do believe and talk about it as our collective work. And so our collective work is putting anti-racism at the center. We will live into our commitment to actively pursue equity and combat systemic inequity. And we will do that in a variety of ways, many of them being what you are already up to, both in your individual parishes and the work that you do collaboratively between parishes, and even in the community partnerships that I know many of you have. And so we know that it is there and it is happening. The second lens is that there are points of intersection and connection. And we will be providing resources and programs and initiatives that really allow us to engage in conversations and practices that bring our work together across issue areas. Again, that point of intersection. And so what does it look like for one congregation in Silver Spring to be connecting with another congregation in Norwood, for example, around food justice? Because you all are doing, a lot of you all, if not all, I believe, are doing food ministry. So where are the points of connection there? And I look forward to sort of continue to think through that question with you all. Another important part of this conversation is justice, theology of justice, right? And for me, theology is not just a mission statement. It really is something that points us toward the nature of the world that we imagine. And I would even say that we are working, really actively working toward. This image on your screen with the two hands here comes from a program called Vulnerability and Social Justice. And I use it here because it's essential for me that relationships and being authentic to who we are central to how we're going to get to a place of real deep justice. And because we are Christians, we have the gift of creating and living out theologies of justice. And so these hands here are living, breathing peoples and cultures and experiences. And so too must our theology be living and breathing. And so as we journey together, I will be providing resources for us to think about how do we think theologically and spiritually about our pursuit of equity and justice. Lastly, I want to point you to a few highlights. I mean, you all across our diocese and in your region are doing amazing work around equity and justice, but these are just a few highlights in my time here in the diocese over the last 7 months or so. Over 30% of our parishes have completed and/or are participating in sacred ground offerings, which is up about 10% since our last gathering. And so we are seeing this pull towards this truth telling. And it's really exciting for us to say we're a diocese that, wants to really become anti-racist. And we have, as my GMA says, the proof's in the pudding. Maybe all your GMAs say it too. So we're really excited about that. Secondly, we see, as you can see here and read with me, that there's the creation of the Afghan Refugee Response Team with 15 congregations agreeing to directly support refugee families. And this is led by one of our South Montgomery deacons, Reverend Ann Dursey. And so we're so grateful for her leadership and all of the relationships and wisdom and resources and energy that she's drawing on from within your region to make this work as viable as it is. And so absolute gratitude to you and many of you on this call. Lastly, you'll see 14 congregations have joined the first cohort of the Reparations Task Force Congregational History Project. Even more exciting, 4 of those parishes are from South Montgomery. And so again, just the evidence, right? If justice and equity is something that we see as long-term, but our work in the here and now is to leave evidence and plant seeds of a world beyond what we have access to now, well, then you all are doing it. Being able to say, hey, we have questions and we really want to explore what it means to tell the truth about racism, to tell the truth about how our own personal stories and our own congregational histories might align in ways that we don't love with our, nation's history around racism and all the isms. And what do we then do about that? What are the right relationships we really want to pour into to make this place a real place of equity and justice? And so with that, I'm so excited to be a part of this journey with you. I'm grateful to accompany you as we begin and continue, not even begin, continue this conversation and this work. So I look forward to more together. All right, everyone, be well. Hello, everyone. And
Alan, I think you can, if you can just bring us all back and you can take down your screen for a second, I'd be grateful. Hi, everyone. It's good to see your faces again. You've all just been listening to a lot of information, a lot of updates, some of which you may have known about through your own experience, or some of it may be new to you. I simply want to acknowledge, first of all, that you've been listening intently to this presentation. Remind you, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to type them in or to reach out to any of your diocesan team. It would be an understatement to say how grateful and how proud I am of the work that has been done collectively in this diocese in the past 10 years that has brought us to this point. The dreams that are starting to come into focus based on hard years of discerning and trial and error, and finally settling in on a long strategic planning process, and then naming for ourselves a few pretty audacious goals that might have the ability to bring us into a sense of greater common identity and mission and purpose across these very diverse regions and congregations. It's an extraordinary undertaking. And yet I feel, as you can tell from the work that has been the fruits that are starting to come into play, some of the things that we just dreamed about a few years ago are starting to take root in the common life of the diocese. That doesn't mean that every congregation is acutely aware of everything. That's not how systems work. You all have been very busy in your own congregational life. You may not have even thought very much about any of the things that have been talked about here, depending on what's been happening in your world. And, you know, it's been a minute. I mean, there's been a lot going on in the past few years. And so we're all discerning God's presence and God's will in the ways that we can. Here are a few things I hope you take away. And this is what I say almost every time I visit a congregation in the parish setting. First of all, that I would pray that whether or not the language or the methodologies that have been described here thus far are in complete alignment, or even beginning alignment with what you're doing. My prayer is that you begin to recognize what God is doing in your community as having some connection to what's happening in other communities across our Episcopal diocese, or conversely, that your community has something particular and unique and distinctive that is essential to the whole that is our branch of the Jesus movement. So I often say, don't worry so much about whether or not you've quote unquote engaged something as to listen for resonance, right? To listen for resonance as to where the Spirit seems to be stirring. And then also part of our job is to say, okay, how can we, and this we've learned from the Unstuck group, how can we dare to dream and cast our gaze toward a bold vision, but then have the discipline to take that vision and bring it into some alignment with practices that we undertake for a period of time that moves us one step closer from where we are to where we feel God is calling us to go. Because if we just continued on doing what we'd always been doing, we would wind up where we had always been heading, right? Some of which is fine, some of which we might, some of those trends we might be worried about. But if we're actually trying to change a trend or to move something forward, we have to practice by putting into actual behavior and priorities and diocesan resources or parish resources, something that we want to move. So in the context of a congregation, for example, going back to the vital signs, I would say to any given congregation, where are you strong? Where do you have like wind in your sails? Because you have been tending to this vital sign, whether you consciously knew it or not. Celebrate that, give thanks to God for that, maybe invest in it further. Is there a vital sign that you have a sense is being an area of your parish's life that if you were to invest in with some strategic energy and priority would really be a game changer in your life as a community? Now, it's usually best not to start with the one where you have, where it's a gaping hole, right? It's usually best to find one where there's some energy already coalescing around that. But that really is a spirit issue. It's a sense of calling in your own community. Where is it strategically and prayerfully on, the Spirit has put it on your plate? I'm thinking of what Anne-Marie said about All Saints Chevy Chase and the priorities that those of you at All Saints put in your plan. It's clear that you wanted to work on those things. That's why you named them, and you named them to work on them. And that's what you're hearing in our plan. And the idea, for example, if you're in transition, we're going to use the vital signs as a diagnostic. Okay, where are you strong? Where are your growing edges? Where do you feel God calling you to invest? And what does that say to you about the kind of leader that you might be praying for and is being prepared to join you in this ministry? Does that make sense? I mean, it's meant to be a way to take something enormous like congregational health and bring it down to something that you might work on in a particular season for a particular time. And so when I think about looking ahead, what I want to stress is that many of the things that we've started in these past 2.5 years will continue. It's not like a checkoff list. Okay, we dealt with race and racial equity. Okay, moving on to the next thing. We've dealt with vitality, on to the next thing. It's not like that. It's putting into daily and weekly and systemic practice those things, as Anne-Marie said, that are not silver bullets, but are the ways that we move toward this elusive goal of alignment with the kingdom of God to the best that God gives us ability, right? So that's the congregational vitality sign. It will be our bread and butter for the rest of my episcopate. There's nothing more important than helping each of our congregations tend to the basic practices of being healthy congregations. The School for Christian Faith and Leadership is a dream that has come into realization in large measure because of the giftedness of this diocese and the number of people who had just extraordinary passion for discipleship and leadership that were diffuse. And what the school is allowing us to do is to gather those resources, amplify them, and allow some of our most gifted people to share their gifts more broadly. And then through the brilliance of the people that are at the helm at the diocesan staff, leveraged by the Lilly Foundation seeing promise in us, and frankly, the disaster of the COVID crisis that pushed all of us online way faster than we ever would have gone on our own, we now have the workings of a school that will be both virtual and in person when in person makes sense, but also this vast library of resources that is at your disposal. And again, that's not going anywhere. That's going to be embedded into our congregational life, right? And then the third, the area of equity and justice, that's not something we dreamed up in the strategic plan. That was true to the charism of this diocese. And all that we've done is attempt to do what the plan originally said, which was if we leveraged our energies rather than kept them disparate, congregation by congregation, we could probably have greater impact for the kingdom of God. It just kind of makes sense when you say it, but actually doing it takes some real effort and aligning energies. And you're going to hear a lot more about that because you're already doing it in so many ways, but highlighting, especially in this region, the work around our Afghan refugee response efforts. But it's that idea of if we do things together in alignment, we will give God more to work with, and others will join us because of the nature of the energy that is the foundation of momentum. Racial equity and justice, again, isn't going to go anywhere. The need to work on that in our communities and in ourselves isn't going to go anywhere. It is our nation's, some call it our original sin, some call it our Achilles heel. It is the foundational reality in which we have been conceived as a nation, as we live as a people. So that's going to be ongoing. But how we work at it and some of the intersectional issues will be ones that each congregation will discern in its own way, and then we will work on together. So that's just a headline to say not very much about the original 2.5 years of the plan is going to change. It's just going to get deeper and broader, and we're going to talk about them until you're sick of it, or until it becomes your language as well, or you come up with better language, right? But it's just we're dancing around the same things. And we're also always going to take advantage of learning from other traditions and other churches, both within our system and outside of it, who are onto something that is spirit-led. Because as our presiding bishop says, we're the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. That means that we can probably learn from other branches that are connected to the same source, right? And also live out our unique charism. Okay, thank you for listening. I'm not done yet. I've got 2 more things that I want to put on the table for us. And this is in the looking ahead side of things. Because we were wisely guided by our consultants at the Unstuck Group to think in terms of a 5-year plan, right? Think in terms of 5 years. So that allowed us to put a lot of stuff on the, on the dream list. And then they said, okay, now what are you going to focus on in year 1? What are you going to focus on in year 2, right? So don't try to do everything all at once, but do this in incremental stages. Okay, so now we're coming up to year 3, right? So here are the things I'm inviting you to consider under the umbrella of tending soil. Okay. We're not going to necessarily start something new in this area. We might, but right now I'm asking you to think about soil for one initiative that is probably our most, well, let me just say it and see what you think. One of the things we said is that we would launch or relaunch up to 3 congregations in the diocese whose primary mission focus would be rising generations. Okay, we said that. We said that we wanted to launch or relaunch up to 3 congregations whose primary mission focus would be rising generations, not one of 7 priorities, but the primary focus. And the reason we said that was that we were persuaded by the data, both within our own tradition and especially outside of it, that says the churches that have the greatest success in reaching the demographics that are least represented in our churches are the churches who make that demographic their top priority, which is kind of a logical sentence if you think about it, right? If they make it their top priority, they have a greater sense of making progress on that priority than if it's one of 7. And when I say one of 7, I mean that most of our congregations are multi-generational, and we want to keep them that way. It's not, we don't want them to become single generation churches. We value that. But this is an experiment that says, what if we did that? Now, I'm wise enough to know as your bishop right now that because I've tried this and failed a couple of times, actually 3 times, from a diocesan level, try to start something in a region of the diocese, right? And in every instance, the biggest resistance to that rising generation effort came from existing congregations who were concerned that we were planting something that might siphon off the precious few young adults who were in their communities, right? And I get that, totally get that. And so what I'd like to I'm asking each of the regions to consider this now. If you look at your map of Southern Montgomery County and you just do even what little you know about where younger when I say younger, I mean people who are 35 and younger, right? Where are the 35 and younger, maybe even 40 and younger, congregating now? Where are the population bases where that demographic is most highly represented? And what would it look like if in Southern Montgomery County, we were to experiment with an alternative worshiping experience that was designated or focused on that demographic? And if you were to say to me as a region, we think, and I have some ideas of where it could be, and I have a lot of ideas actually where it could be in Southern Montgomery County, but the point is, for maybe 1 or 2, we only need 1 congregation really, but if we had 2 or 3 who said, we'd like to be part of that exploration and study and experimentation, not necessarily to create a new church, but to create a worshiping experience that then might be one we could invite our younger adults to be a part of as part of the building up of their social fabric and their spirituality, that we might contribute to, that we might want to help nurture along. And what I'm hoping for is that in 2022, if every region were to consider that we might identify in 2022 up to 3, I'd be thrilled with 2 areas of the diocese where we would put intentional effort, not just coming from the church house staff, but from a cohort of people in the diocese wanting to learn from other Episcopalians around the country who have done this kind of church planting, from other denominations who are doing this work pretty successfully right in our midst, and how we might do something similar. Okay? So I invite you to think about that, and we can circle back around that at another time. This is just planting the idea. And I can't help but believe that we have so much in our theology and our communal life that would be that we have to offer. But I do think we have a delivery system issue that we might want to see if we could be present in a different sort of way. Okay. Any questions about that or any comments before I move on to the one final thing, and then I'll stop. But any questions or comments about that?
You can
I'm sorry.
in the chat.
Put them in the chat or unmute and just talk. That's fine. The one thing I want to say is if any of you, if that's piqued your interest, just email me or email Anne Marie and just say, look, I'd like to learn more. I'd like to explore more. I think, anything at all, just so that we have a sense of like who's thinking about it. I mean, I'm sure you're already thinking about that. I don't know a congregation that isn't thinking about how we can reach young people. I mean, that's like, I hear it all the time. And so we've tried some things. You may have some real success. So we can learn from that and maybe amplify it, right? Because as a mother of young adults, one thing I know is that it's been kind of lonely for young adults in the last year. And so creating places of community and engagement and authentic relationship might be really welcome at this time. Final thing I'll say, and yeah, Sarah, go ahead. You want to say something?
I think you're giving us too much credit. I can tell you St. John's is not asking that question. And I'm not saying we don't want to. I just want to be really honest. I don't want to just nod my head and say, yeah, Bishop thinks we are. That demographic that you're talking about, we're not proactively asking that question. So I just want to be honest about that. Thank you.
Okay. And Sarah, and I'm not making any judgments one way or the other. It's may not be for everybody, right? You may have plenty on your plate already. This is not a judgment. It's kind of just like sensing where might God be stirring so that we could engage this work. I'm confident that it's happening. I just don't know quite who the partners are. I could guess, but I've learned that when I guess, I'm usually like, if I'm lucky, 50% right. And I'm just hoping for better odds this time around.
Well, you've definitely sparked a major interest, so thank you.
All right. One final thing, and this is a low-hanging fruit thing. One of the other things that we said in our strategic plan is that we wanted to really have make available and to advocate for solid creation care practices in each of our congregations. And we have done very little on that in the last 5 or 6 years on a diocesan level. The good news is that on a parish level, it is very high on many congregations' awareness and engagement. And what we'll be looking for in 2022 are those champions of creation care in your congregations so that we can gather them, learn together, and amplify our collective efforts by putting some diocesan leveraging energy behind that so that within 18 months, we can have a more robust and engaged platform of creation care practices, both for our congregations as institutions and for our people. So that's, like I said, that's a little low-hanging fruit because I know it's out there. We just said this is the year we're going to do some real organizing work around that. Okay. You've been very attentive. Thank you for listening. This ends, I'm done with my part. So I think I hand it back to you, Cricket, for instructions as to go next. But again, thank you. Thank you for listening and for your part and all the good things that God is doing.
Are there any questions? Please type them into the chat.
And if you don't have any, that's fine. If you have one at 2:00 in the morning, just email us, right? or a great idea, anything at all, just feel free. But if the floor is open for a little bit, if people would like to ask anything.
Right. Well, I'm not seeing anything or hands raised. So let's move to, well, actually, they did give me some questions of, if someone would want to respond on, where your congregation might attend to some of, which of the vital signs could you see your congregation attending to? We all want dinner, don't we?
I should put the screen down, Cricket, or Alan, screen down. So I guess this is just an opportunity if anyone would like to share, if there's been a part of your congregation's life that has been really alive for you that you wouldn't mind just offering up for the community. Anything at all?
If I could share, I have had some conversations with my adult son, who is 33, with their baby who's a little over 14 months now. And I asked him the ugly question, Kevin, why don't you guys go to church? And it's interesting, I just said, tell me what your life is like in 3 words. And what, if you were to go someplace, what would you be looking for? And so we had the conversation, and then I said, if I sent you these questions, would you refer it out to some of your friends? He said, sure. And what came back, and it's hardly statistically significant, okay, but it made me start to think that some of the things that we may need to do have nothing to do with religion, that they're actually secular kinds of things that we're going to have to do to get people in the door. Classes, parenting, babysitting, that kind of thing is going to be the gateway for people my son's age. So I just found it very, very interesting to talk with them. And that came out because we had a vestry meeting and we were trying to decide how could we bring in new young people? I'm like, why don't we ask them? Because there's nobody here that age. And so I did. And that's the information I got. So I just offer that up. Anybody else?
I'll jump in here, Cricket. One is I'll say I haven't done a poll or anything like that, but there's a young woman somewhat associated with our church who has made mention when churches have done things like that, especially babysitting. She's a single mother, and how much of a relief, how much respect she had for the church and things like that. So that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. To answer the questions that you had up there, I would say one of the things that I think All Saints is doing fairly well right now is uplifting and inviting worship. About a year or so before the pandemic, we started what we call the family table service, which is a more contemporary style service. It's basically a Rite 3 service, going through things, and it's intentionally intergenerational, and we try and get as many folks to participate in the service as possible. So in doing the prayers of the people, we'll have 8-year-olds lead us in the prayers of the people, or read scriptures or things like that. And then it's got much more of a conversational style in the sermons, PowerPoint slides, things like that. And that service was really growing before the pandemic, and it's growing once again. I mean, it's nowhere near the size that it used to be, of course. But that combined with our more traditional service that meets in the nave, the family table service meets in our fellowship hall. And then we've got much more of the full choir and the organ and, much more of what you might think of a traditional Episcopal service. And so there really is this opportunity for, which is your flavor, come and serve. 2 areas I would say that we personally probably have room to work on with the vital signs here is one is going to be faithful financial practices. And I'm not 100% sure if are we faithful at the parish level or faithful at the parishioner level, but however you define it, we're bad.
Yes and yes, right?
Right. And especially for where we're located in Chevy Chase, it would make sense that our giving would be a lot higher, than it is. And then I think we've got some things. It's been a while since we've had an accounting audit. We've got a pretty big staff if you count part-time nursery workers and preschool teachers and things like that. And just trying to figure out all the ways in which, we're not spending wisely or responsibly and things like that, and trying to figure that out. And our accounting team, I think, is about to pull their hair out trying to figure these things out while trying to keep us moving forward and afloat in the midst of everything else. And then the other one I would say that we have room to work on is blessing our community. We have a small, what we call a blessing bag ministry for the handful of homeless folks that would come by the church. But I don't know that we do much to go out to find them, to help, and to work with others within the community to kind of, work out and bless, get to know our neighbors and that type of thing. And I think we could do a lot more and benefit from hearing ideas on what other folks do there.
Thank you, BJ. It's really helpful.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you. We'll get an overview now of the draft 2022 budget from Steve Gibson, who is the chair of the Diocesan Finance Committee, and my wonderful treasurer, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Cricket. Yeah, if we could put down the slide just for a minute while we kind of get into this, and then we got some nice slides for you to see. So good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Gibson. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee of the Diocese, and I'm here to provide an overview of the budget for 2022. A copy of the draft is available in the regional gathering page of on the diocesan website, and I encourage you to look at it. We are just going to give the highlights tonight, but there's a lot of detail. So if you want to see the real budget, go to the website. And if you have any comments or questions about it after this session, feel free to contact Andrew Walter, Canon to the Ordinary, and he would be glad to receive any feedback that you might have. The 2022 budget will not be finalized and approved until diocesan convention in January. Between now and then, Bishop Marion and diocesan leaders will establish the goals for the third year of the strategic plan, and then the Council, Finance Committee, and diocesan staff will work to ensure that the 2022 budget presented at convention reflects these strategic priorities. Now we're ready for slide number 1. There we go. Here are some highlights on the revenue portion of the draft budget. Congregational giving is the largest source of income for the diocese, accounting for about half of all revenue. While we continue to live with the coronavirus pandemic, we feel that a small increase in congregational giving can be expected in 2022, and revenue has been budgeted accordingly. As you will see, in 2021, the forecast is for contributions of $2.225 million, and for the 2022 budget, we've moved that up slightly to $2.3 million. The other major source of diocesan revenue, representing 38% of all revenue, is SOPR fund income. The amount of SOPR fund income budgeted each year is based on a 4.8% draw on the average year-end fund balance over the prior 3 years. Thanks to markets that have continued to rise over the past 3 years, the calculated amount of SOPR income available for next year's budget is $1.75 million. This is an increase of almost $200,000 over SOPR income available for the current year. The next largest item of the budget is, on the revenue side, is an allocated portion of the 5-year funding provided by the Lilly Grant. That grant was for a 5-year period, and so we've divided it up into the program for each of our fiscal years. Revenue for 2022 from the Lilly Grant, along with contributions from parishes who are participating in this Trending Our Soil initiative, is projected at $247,200. The budget further includes $180,000 anticipated from the bishop's annual appeal, $100,000 of interest and dividend income, $65,000 from the Corton Education Fund, which will be used to support the School for Christian Faith and Leadership, $25,000 from grant and reserve funds dedicated to Latino ministry, and $90,000 of other income from miscellaneous sources. Combining all of those sources of income, total revenue for 2022 is currently budgeted at $4.67 million. Now, if we could have the next slide, please. This is the expense side of the budget. Line item detail for this portion of the budget also is available on the web page. And there are many more lines to go through on the expense side. It's much more complicated. So I will just be giving a very general overview here. As you will see from the first bullet on this slide, operational expenses have been adjusted upward to reflect expenses as we've experienced them in 2021, and also some increases that are going to result from when we go back to in-person meetings, which reduced some budget line items last year when we were all on Zoom, but now we're going to be back meeting together, hopefully, and we will have expenses in connection with that. The salaries are being increased by 3% across the board. If you look at salary and benefit line items in the detailed budget, you might notice that there are a lot of deviations from 3% in the amount of change from last year. That's because those line items reflect not only the 3% salary changes, but also changes in staffing and in allocation of expenses among programs. Dialysis and Ministries is the largest segment on the cost side of the budget at 63% of total expense. This segment implements the strategic plan initiatives, as well as including the other services the diocese provides in support of church and ministry development. As noted on the slide, this segment encompasses congregational support, Christian faith and leadership, ministry development and deployment, Latino ministry, and social justice and advocacy. The activities funded by the Lilly Grant are included in the Christian faith and leadership portion of this section of the budget. The next largest expense category is general administration, accounting for 17% of total expense. This includes such things as the operating cost of the diocesan offices and church house, the portion of staff time that is not directly allocated to programs, and other general overhead expenses, which are line itemed in detail in the budget. The national and international ministries piece includes diocesan contributions to the Episcopal Church and the Provincial Synod. The 2022 budget maintains support of the Episcopal Church at an amount equal to 15% of diocesan operating revenue, which is the level of support that is asked of each member diocese. Governance expense at 4% of the total includes items such as maintenance of databases, conducting the annual diocesan convention, convening meetings of the diocesan council and other committees, and participating in the general convention of the Episcopal Church. Finally, the communications segment of the budget covers costs related to preparation and coordination of online publishing and other diocesan messaging to the parishes and to the general public. Altogether, expenses in the draft budget total $4.6 million, which is equal to the anticipated revenue for a balanced budget. This compares with the original 2021 budget of $4.47 million. Even with the increased expenses in the 2022 budget, expenses remain below what we had in some pre-pandemic budgets. This reflects the diligent efforts of the bishop and the staff to be good stewards of our diocesan resources, while at the same time working to support our parishes and to implement the strategic plan during this challenging time. So I hope this overview has given you a general understanding of the draft 2022 budget. If you want to dig into the details, please spend some time with the budget document on the diocesan website. And as I mentioned at the outset, if you have comments and questions, please share them with the Canon for the Ordinary, Andrew Walter. With that, Andrew and I would be happy to respond to any questions that you might have about the draft budget for next year. Thank you.
Feel free to put those questions in the chat or just jump in. Anyone? All right. I know. Get on with it, Cricket. If we're going to take about, can we say 7 minutes and be back at 8:15? And then we'll talk about what's happening in our neck of the woods. 8:15, everybody.
Great.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
And we're back. So we're going to talk about our regional work with Afghan refugees, and I'm going to let Ann Dursey kick off the discussion.
So thank you so much, Cricket, and good evening, Bishop Marianne and colleagues. I thought it was important when we look at our regional efforts on Afghan refugees that we take a minute to look at what we're doing at the diocesan level, because that's the context for so much of what we're doing. And I'm really glad in that context to have a moment to highlight our work to help welcome Afghan refugees through the Afghan Refugee Response Team that was established by Bishop Marianne this August. And I'd like to start by pointing out that all of our refugee work is firmly rooted in Matthew 25 and Jesus' clear call to welcome the stranger. And we know that welcoming refugees has long been a priority for the Episcopal Church, and that many in our diocese and our region have already been engaged in this work. But the Afghan crisis is a bit different. The sudden evacuation of thousands of Afghans poses a new and special challenge to our long-established system of refugee resettlement, which lost significant funding and experienced staff under the last administration. The support of faith communities is really important, has always, in fact, been crucial to successful refugee resettlement. And it's especially so, I would say, in this crisis, when so many people are arriving so quickly and our entire system is unprepared and under great pressure. So recognizing this, Bishop Marianne has called on the growing cadre of deacons in the Diocese of Washington to help lead an effort to empower and support our parishes to get involved in ways large and small, as appropriate to each one, in partnership with other parishes, other faith communities, with government, nonprofits, and civic groups to help resettle refugees. And resettling this large group of new Afghan arrivals that's expected to flood into our communities over the next 6 months is really going to be a big challenge, and it requires a whole of society effort. So it's important to note too, though, that while this effort is targeted at the moment on addressing the Afghan refugee crisis, we intend to build welcoming the stranger as a shared and sustainable ministry in our diocese for the long term. Because refugees, frankly, have always flocked to the national capital area, and they will continue to do so. And the capacity that we can build now to enable us to welcome Afghan refugees is going to pay off in the future, to welcome the many refugees from so many places who will continue to come into our communities in the future. So the EDAO Afghan Refugee Response Team includes deacons and really experienced lay leaders who are interested in refugee ministry. And we meet weekly right now on Tuesdays to share information and connections and develop those initiatives that we can to help empower our parishes in all this work. And the work of welcome is really done at the local level with parishes in the lead. We've prepared, for example, a resource guide on how parishes can sponsor and assist refugees. And we've established a bank of experienced mentors from parishes who have already done this work to serve as a resource for parishes that are new to it and want to get into it. We're linking parishes to resources in the community, in nonprofits, and other partners, and we want to help people find all the possible opportunities to help Afghan refugees in many ways. And that stems from raising money and collecting in-kind donations to providing mentoring and other services to help refugees acclimate in American society, equipping apartments, sponsoring families. And we're so happy to see that so many in the diocese have been stepping up to this work. And in our region alone, I've heard from every single parish about what they either are doing or what they are considering doing to contribute to this ministry and how the team can support them. And I really look forward to hearing a little bit from everybody here tonight about what they're doing in their parish. So with that, Cricket, I'll turn it back to you and look forward to hearing what everyone has to say about the good work that they're doing.
Thank you, Ann. I am going to call on deacons one at a time. We'll start with Mary Seabold. Is Mary still here? There you are. need to unmute.
Sorry about that, everybody. I was trying to lower my screen so I could actually read what I had prepared. And in the process, I have lost myself. Anyway, let me try it again. Cricket, can you call on someone else until I can
I
figure?
sure can.
Sorry about that.
We'll go to Adrian Clamp. Adrian.
Sorry, I know. I was trying to unmute.
Okay.
The Redeemerites responded to requests to help immediately and generously, raising almost $10,000 within 3 days and asking what more they could do to help. We've partnered with Ascension Silver Spring and Christ Church Kensington to sponsor a large family of 3 parts. The first family of 7 was settled into an apartment in Alexandria near relatives that helped with introductions and initial conversations. Together, our parish has set up their first home in the US. The other parts of the family are in Qatar, Germany, and Texas in various stages of processing. Tomorrow, Ben Ivins and Patrick Fitzgerald from our congregation will deliver 25 to 30 bags and boxes of coats and winter clothing to the collection center in Sterling. Our youth group have decorated and placed boxes in their schools for collection of toiletries and other necessities for refugees at the Dulles Processing Center. We're committed to helping to set up initial homes for the remaining members of the families we have adopted and to helping in the larger effort in whatever way our small but mighty branch of God's family can. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Mary, you ready?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. St. Dunstan's Long Welcome Refugee Ministry is organizing a series of virtual fundraisers to support resettlement of Afghan refugees. During a service in September, the church raised over $5,000 for Lutheran social services. And with the surrounding community, parishioners will continue to identify, publicize, and participate in one-off activities such as the Adams Coat Drive and may help set up apartments later. We did manage to get a huge number of coats, which Patty and 2 other parishioners are going to deliver tomorrow. So we are, as Adrian said, mighty but strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, BJ.
Sure. So at All Saints Church in late August and early September, our Director for Mission and Outreach, Shireen David, launched a refugee care program in partnership with Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area. We began recruiting parishioners to join a refugee care team and focused on collecting needed items for those who had been displaced. Parishioners were encouraged to bring newly bought items that would outfit various rooms of a family home for donation, and they were told to bring them by September 26th. And we collected enough bed linens, kitchen items, cleaning supplies, and so on to fill 2 large SUVs, and we delivered the items to Lutheran Social Services in Woodbridge. Shireen then contacted Lutheran Social Services Director in Hyattsville to learn more about how we can continue engaging in service opportunities. And we have a follow-up meeting with them for this upcoming Monday. Shireen then contacted Deacon Ann Dursey and had a wonderful conversation with her about the possibility of All Saints Church co-sponsoring a family, Lord willing, in the near future. We're praying for God to provide wisdom, direction, unity to team members and resources so that we might commit to serving a refugee family in the next year. In the meantime, we're hoping to have another donation drive for families in the area. And the biggest need right now, we've been told, are Visa gift cards, Uber gift cards, and so on. And so rather than collecting particular items like we did in the past, we're hoping to concentrate on collecting gift cards.
Okay. Terry Murphy.
Yes, thank you. Well, Adrian has raised the issue that we've been working together, so I'll give you a little more detail. We became aware of a large extended family that was coming. There was one branch of the family already in residence here, but 5 more segments of their family are on their way. Joan, the rector, Joan Beilstein, was informed about this through an acquaintance of hers. So when she told me about it, I contacted a few deacons, and Adrian and Sarah Thorne of Christchurch stepped up immediately. And so working together, we managed to provide for a family of 7 so they could move into their home, all the kitchen supplies, the linens, bedding, all of that. So we've provided for them, plus some rental assistance. It's very expensive once they are assigned a home. They've got to pay like $3,000, like security deposit, first month's rent, all of that, and they have nothing. So this poor one man who's been living here has been trying to pay $3,000 per branch of the family, and it's just too much. So we got one in a big apartment, another one settled into a small apartment, and there are 3 more branches of the family. One is in Texas, another 7-member family working on some visa issues. 2 others were in quarantine in Qatar and also Germany because of the measles outbreak. They've finally been released, so they're on their way. We have, through Redeemer, collecting all that wonderful money, we have enough to pay the $3,000 for each of those family segments to come in, because the man living here just can't do it. So we are thrilled. They are gracious people. It's been wonderful. And another part of what's going on is our deacon postulant, Melissa Seitz, has been working with Lutheran Social Services through her internship, social service internship. And also she's working with the Diocesan Committee. And Melissa was contacted by the Adams Center about this coat drive. And so word spread out through various means. I've brought in a couple of mosques to help with that as well. So they need to collect 13,000 coats. So if you have an extra coat, yeah, exactly, 13,000. We're working on it, and tomorrow we'll deliver some of those. Another thing that I've been working on personally is with the Interfaith Liaison to Montgomery County Executive. I spoke with her, and there's not a very big Afghan community in Montgomery County, but they will be here shortly. And so I've asked her to do 2 things: to maybe get a list of doctors and dentists who will provide a few donations gratis, because some of these people have never seen a dentist, they've never done anything. And also to ask the county executive if he can find an area of apartment buildings where one segment might be given over to an Afghan community, so they can have a better sense of community. And I've been drawing on other faiths as well to help with all of this. So that's where Ascension is right now.
Perfect. Sarah, were you going to talk about anything at Grace?
I didn't know I was going to, but I can.
Good.
Grace, as most of you know, has had an ongoing relationship and has already settled the Faradula family. And so we have some experience there. Our vestry voted to match parishioner contributions up to $4,000. So we'll be sending $8,000 to the Diocesan Refugee Relief collection. And that may have already gone, but that's in process. And I think as of this morning, we had just at Grace over 200 coats, and we included the school that's on our campus, which is the we have a school on our campus, and we have the Episcopal Day School and they're collecting as well. So we should be taking several cars of coats on Friday to that collection as well.
Terrific. And you needed to update us on St. John's.
Right. So St. John's has become a formal partner with Lutheran Social Services in fully sponsoring for a year a 6-member Afghan family. that arrived recently. And that means, putting them in housing and then providing all of the support services they need for a year to become independent. And we're doing that in conjunction with UCC Westmoreland, which is a congregational church on Westmoreland Circle, and also with a couple of Rotary clubs in our neighborhood. There's just a lot of interest in helping. And I also wanted to mention to people that the Afghan refugee response team at the level of the diocese is reporting every other week in the diocesan newsletter. We've created a listserv you can sign up to if you want to get more regular reports on opportunities to help in many ways, like the coat drive is just one. There's a great need for volunteers on the bases, for example, and we can tell you how to get involved with that work. And then there's one huge problem that stands in the way of refugees settling successfully in our area, and that's housing. Mm-hmm. And the refugee resettlement agencies are really desperate for housing. So they've asked us to reach out through our congregations and see if there are landlords or people with connections to landlords or people who know someone who has an apartment building, or if there's a convent or a seminary or a school that has, dorm rooms that they would be willing to make available. We're gathering all the leads we possibly can to help solve the housing problem, because right now they're putting a lot of people in temporary Airbnb and hotels while they search and try to find landlords who will work with the refugee resettlement agencies. So please help us with that, and read the diocesan newsletter every other week for the updates, and sign up for the listserv, those of you who are interested in hearing more regularly about opportunities to help. Thanks.
Thank you. You all make this ruined deacon a real happy person.
Wow. What an amazing witness. Thank you so much. And thank you to the deacons and the clergy who have spoken, and for your leadership, truly transformational in our life. And I also wanted to just acknowledge two of the clergy who spoke are new in their roles. BJ is taking the helm as interim priest or interim rector at All Saints as they do their search. And Sarah Otterstall has joined us as the rector of Grace. And we're so blessed by both of you and your respective leadership. And thank you. Thank you, Anne, for your leadership in shepherding all of this through. And again, to the deacons and the many lay leaders and clergy who have opened your hearts to serve those who have come into our communities having lost everything. So what an amazing witness you are.
I'd like to then just open things up. If there's anything that folks would like to explore as far as things that we can do together, how we might be able to help each other with things, ministry issues, worship. I know that, the clergy of the deanery are going to be at Redeemer tomorrow afternoon, so that we can actually see each other's faces, and I can take you on a tour of the new place. But just opening that up, is there anything anyone would like to say or ask or inspire?
I have a question for Anne. This is Kevin. I'm from St. John, so I could ask you on Sunday as well. But it just crossed my mind that several months ago there was a call that came out that was, who had maybe a room that they could provide for a temporary space. And now I know what you're asking for seems like people who are able or who have resources for a much longer time frame commitment. But all of us have different resources, and some of them would generally be short-term, some might be longer-term. What are the parameters that are generally being sought in that case?
So if in a private party is going to offer housing for a refugee family that's coming in through our refugee resettlement system, there are requirements. It has to be private housing, meaning it has to be have a standalone entrance, right? There has to be privacy for the family. And the early calls for people to just take someone into their home, I think that the refugee resettlement agencies have found that's impractical. They can't do the checkups they need to do background checks, and they just don't have the staff to make it work. So instead, they've been turning to using Airbnb has offered some deeply discounted facilities for short-term stays, and then hotel stays. So the International Rescue Committee, which is another refugee resettlement agency, has asked parishes if they want to consider housing a family for 2 weeks while the Refugee Resettlement Agency can find another place for them to stay. It costs roughly $1,400, $90 a day. So if a parish did a fund drive and raised $1,400, they could pay to house a refugee family for 2 weeks while more permanent housing is found. And that's the kind of help they need urgently, financial, but they also need connections to landlords, because during the past administration, when refugees weren't coming in, they lost relationships with the landlords who were willing to work with them. And they have to rebuild those, even as we're trying to house some 2,000 people a day that are now coming into the US from overseas, and they're beginning to release people from the bases. And between now and March, we're going to see just a huge influx of families. So we'll continue to develop at the diocesan level very specific recommendations and suggestions for ways to help, and push those out through the listserv and through the newsletter. Okay. But anyone should feel free to contact me anytime. And actually so many people have. It's just so heartening to think how many people have called me in the past several weeks, looking for ways to help. It's terrific.
Anything else? Well, why don't we end as we began, with a prayer?
Wait, Cricket, I think Joan wanted to say something.
Were you saying goodbye, or do you had something to say?
Turn on your.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, can everybody hear me now? Okay. As long as we're talking about outreach to immigrants in our community, Tommy's Pantry, I don't know if any of you know about that. It was based in Tacoma Park. It was founded in memory of Jamie Raskin's son, Tommy, who committed suicide a little while ago. And it's a group of different PTAs and schools and different interfaith churches. Well, Ascension is now the home base for Tommy's Pantry. And 3 days a week, we have people that are coming in and packing food, and not only just food, but also toiletries, and it's being distributed once a week. And sometimes we're having like 300 cars of people that wind around the block. We also have people on foot, and the majority of the people coming are immigrants, or people who are definitely food insecure. And they're always looking for volunteers. And that's one way we could work together. And it's Tommy's Pantry. If you want to volunteer, you can also email me, because my spouse Libby is now one of the coordinators and taking that on as her personal ministry. So they really are shorthanded, really needing people to come and help with that ministry, which has really blossomed and is so many people in need. So.
Anybody else?
What day was that, Joan?
It depends. They sometimes pack like on Mondays or Wednesdays, but they always are distributing on Saturdays. And usually there's 2 shifts, like from 8 to 12 and then 2 to 4. But it's amazing to see how many people are showing up by car and on foot. And we're working actually in partnership with the Seventh-day Adventist center down the street, who gets in a lot of the food products, and it's amazing how many people are involved. But you would have to really, either contact Tommy's Pantry, they have a website, or email me and I'll get you in touch with Libby, because she can give you the schedule.
Thank you.
Anything else? Let us pray. O God of unchangeable power and eternal light, look favorably upon your whole church, that wonderful and sacred mystery. By the effectual working of your providence, carry out in tranquility the plan of salvation. Let the whole world see and know that things which were cast down are being raised up, and things which had grown old are being made new, and that all things are being brought to their perfection by him through whom all things were made, your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen. Mary, could you dismiss us, please?
Let us go forth to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening. So grateful to you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.